how might a Jon Jones versus Israel Adesanya fight look? And here's why I bring this up. They go on an extended social media back and forth, predominantly on Twitter, just killing each other for their various, whatever. Okay, Dana White took note of it, and he was asked, is this a fight you want to make? He expressed pretty clear interest in doing it, and not in some kind of, maybe one day. No, like, we've got our eye on this kind of a way. And then, shouts to the boys at Submission Radio, whose names I had forgotten, Casper and Dennis. I apologize, fellas, because we love you very much over here.
I think it's Casper with a C or a K.
It's C and a P, and it's a lot of different things. Yes, K and a C. Nevertheless, they had Eugene Behrman on, I think, their most recent episode, and in it, he was asked, what about a Jon Jones fight? Eugene Behrman has said, according to what conversations with Israel Adesanya tell him, that it doesn't matter if that fight's at heavyweight, middleweight, 205. He wants it. And if Cannonier, who has a big fight at UFC 254, can't get the quickest turnaround, they would look to that one next. BC, how would a fight between Jon Jones and Israel Adesanya look?
That's the question. That is the question. And in some ways, I want to and will kind of pin it back on you in 1 second, Professor Salt and Pepper, because I know you slave over the stove that is watching these videos 49 times, Luke. 49 times. Not 48, bro. Not 50, okay? 49 times. So we talked last week why it makes sense now marketing wise, and it really does. It really does make a lot of sense now. I am blown away that Dana White said it's the fight to make. How does it look? Both you and I gave a sort of knee-jerk, like, look, there's a guy that's rising at the moment, and it's Adesanya. Can I imagine when those two trade touch gloves at 205, can I imagine him having more success? Yes, I can. I get the counter argument of, hold on, bro. We're talking about a skinny middleweight here. What happens when Jon Jones does what the pure Jon Jones does, take you down and ground and pound you? That's a big element of it. That's why, you love matchups make, styles make fights. You love the idea that I do believe Adesanya would have a distinct advantage in speed and in cleverness in a lot of ways on the stand-up. Jon's got great defense. I'd love to see how that chess match goes. Would I love Jon on the ground? Absolutely. But I don't think it's as easy to just count out Adesanya because he's a middleweight right now. Luke, you've seen his kickboxing career. He fought at cruiser and heavy. This is a real fight, Luke. This is a freaking real fight. And on the feet, I don't know if Jon would want to stay there with him for 5 rounds. So I would love to see what Izzy's takedown defense, which has been amazing so far, can do against one of the best wrestlers in the history of this game who's going to have a big size advantage, Luke. I think I need to see this fight. I don't exactly know how it's going to look. So I want to spin it back on you. Let's not forget Jon Jones. Let's talk about the advantages he would have. Can Izzy handle that size difference in the wrestling?
I don't think the size difference is as meaningful as folks think it is. I mean, think about 2 of his last 3 fights, Jon Jones. The last one was Reyes. Okay, legit 205er. I've seen him in person a number of times, and he came to one of my pre-shows at SiriusXM. He's a big dude. Izzy was next to him. Izzy and Dominic Reyes came to that party together, and I saw them stand next to each other. Izzy, I think, was certainly longer than Dominic Reyes and nearly the same stature. Not quite as sort of thick and muscle-bound, but still pretty close, number one. Number 2, the other 2 fighters that would be on that list would be Anthony Smith and Thiago Santos, 2 former middleweights. Well, what is Israel Adesanya? He's a middleweight. I keep saying this with the Weidman case. I'm going to say it here again with the Jon Jones case. People have this idea that there's this, they have the idea of Jon Jones, and then there's Jon Jones. Now, to be clear, Jon Jones would probably, I think, and the odds speak to this, be your favorite. There are numerous plausible scenarios where Jon Jones wins. His fight IQ is extraordinary. His well-roundedness is extraordinary. But the reason why he was in those fights with Smith and Santos, and in a different way, Reyes, I've said it again before, I'm going to say it again. It's because his defense is tremendous. He is hard to hit. And when you land on him, he's usually covered up in some kind of way, or he's very good at rolling with the punches to take away some of the impact. His takedown defense is maybe the best I've honestly ever seen. Just phenomenal. His distance management, quite good. He has what's called single shot high variance. Doesn't throw a lot of combos, but throws one here, one here, one here, one here, one here. He too, like Izzy, has good the sort of jagged rhythms with his strikes. But his offense is not what it once was, and that includes his takedowns. He got 2 against Reyes. They didn't count at all. He got 0 against Thiago Santos, and he did get 3 against Smith. But Smith, I don't think, has as good takedown defense as Israel Adesanya. So I'm not telling you, BC, that he wouldn't get it. But the idea that it's a foregone conclusion is absurd. There's this idea of Jon as this guy who took everybody down, including Daniel Cormier, and then there's the reality of the last few fights. Jon is, 32, 33. He's got a lot of miles on him, and this is the key insight for me, BC. Jon Jones is super smart. He is not dumb at all. Izzy, obviously, very brilliant too. He is fighting in a way that I'm not going to call risk-averse, but he apportions the risk very carefully. This idea that he's just going to go out and march down on Adesanya and grab a hold of him and take him down, I don't find plausible at all. I find it plausible he can get a takedown or 2 or maybe more. I don't think that's crazy. But he's going to have to work for it. He's going to be very careful about it because everything we've seen in this stage of his career speaks to exactly that. The same thing that St. Pierre was doing. And those fights against Reyes and Santos and Smith a lesser extent, but certainly Santos and Reyes, very close fights. What makes you think that Santos can get a card off of Jon Jones and Adesanya can't? That Reyes, in my opinion, beat him and Adesanya can't. Why is that so crazy? People are overestimating the liabilities of Adesanya, and they are overestimating, they're using the inertia of Jon's greatness because he's been so good for so long and just carrying it into 33-year-old Jon Jones, who doesn't fight the way that he used to, even if I recognize, BC, a very formidable threat to anybody in any weight class.
I want to ask you a question that I want you to answer in 10 seconds or less, and I want to make a point. Do you think Izzy could hurt Jon at 205, given Jon's legendary chin?
Yes.
Okay. With that in mind here, Luke, this is why I think Jon should go to heavyweight instead. Because, we talked about, I think he could have a second chapter there with the difference in speed. Look how great DC was when he got back to heavyweight. I think that gap really would allow Jon to be this almost, like you're saying, risk-averse to a degree, Floyd Mayweather-like ability to take a snapshot of the fight. And when the guys he's facing are slower than him, be able to see like the Matrix, coming in and out and react. That's why I think it's a potential bad matchup to meet Adesanya right now at 205, and which is why I want to see it so bad. Not because I want to see Jon lose, but because I think Jon would have the size, the wrestling, the smarts, the defense, as you mentioned, but would have issues with a faster fighter. And I think, even Dom Reyes' speed and angles gave him some trouble. I think Adesanya would give him a lot of trouble. So I want to sort of piggyback this debate and ask you this. If you're Dana White, remember we saw Dana and the Fertitas, drink the whiskey with Conor and make him a company man and plan out his career. Let's say Dana and Endeavor and company sit down with Izzy right now. Would it be even smarter for them to say, we want you to face Jon at 205, but we want you to go to 205 in general right now because this might be the time. I mean, Izzy's young-ish, but he's also, in his early 30s with a long history and glory. Could he also have similarly wide advantages at 205 against all the names right now, considering that division is reloading but not necessarily crazy deep? Is there anything left for him to prove at middleweight? Although, look, I get it before all the haters come at me. I know he doesn't have 7, 8, 9 title defenses, but do you think he actually should fight in general at 205 towards this idea of eventually moving up all the way? And right now, would he run the table against these guys?
Run the table, I don't know. I mean, you zig when you're supposed to zag in the sport, BC. You know as well as I do, the margin for error is pretty low, which is why Jon's fight style is so smart, right? I mean, he knows one wrong move and the whole thing just comes, one Jenga piece and the whole thing just comes completely tumbling down. So I think that speaks to why he fights the way that he does now. I would say, I don't know that we need to jump the gun and push Izzy in that direction this stage. I mean, the Whitaker rematch to me is kind of interesting. A Costa rematch, I think, down the road would be interesting to me. He still has work to do in Cannonier and maybe Hermanson. Hermanson also, I think, would be kind of an interesting fight based on the way in which he competes. There's still some challenges, I think, that he has to answer for. And some days you have good days, some days you have bad days. You still have to show up as a champion and put your title up for grabs. And Anderson Silva doing that for as long as he did tells us that anybody who wants to even compete at middleweight for some of the accolades that he enjoyed has to do some of the same things. But I just feel like if you wanted to pick Jon Jones to beat Israel Adesanya, I do not in any way think that is crazy. Maybe even that's the likeliest outcome, depending on one's perspective. But this idea that like Jon's just going to run him over, take him down, pound him out, this is not in touch with reality. That is a hugely competitive fight, very interesting, and one with enormous stakes no matter what you do. So, BC, that's what I say.
Are you in?
This is our time. The world's changed, and you are right in the center of it.
I don't know what's ahead, but all bets are off.